Hello everyone, welcome to my channel. Are you ready to go on an adventure? Not back in time, but to places that feel like time capsules themselves. Today, we're kicking off a brand new series, and I am so excited to have you here for it. We're about to journey through some of Europe's most incredible medieval cities. Now, when you picture a medieval city, what comes to mind? Towering castle walls? Narrow, winding streets? Bustling market squares? You're spot on, but there's so much more to it than that. These cities weren't just random collections of buildings. They were masterfully planned communities, born from the ashes of old empires and the spark of new ages. Each one was a complex, living ecosystem designed for commerce, community, and of course, defense. Think about it. Every single cobblestone, every defensive wall, every town square was placed with a specific purpose in mind. These weren't just accidents of history. They were the result of incredible foresight, engineering, and a deep understanding of human needs. The people who built these cities were facing challenges we can hardly imagine today, yet they created urban spaces so resilient that their layouts still influence how people live, work, and move around centuries later. In this series, Time Capsule Cities, exploring medieval urban planning, we're going to peel back the layers of these amazing places. We'll walk their ancient streets, uncover the secrets of their defensive designs, and understand the logic behind their layouts. We'll explore how they managed everything from water supply to trade routes, all within the confines of massive stone walls. We'll ask the big questions. How did they build these cities to last? What ingenious solutions did they come up with for everyday problems? And what lessons can we, in our modern, sprawling metropolises, learn from their incredible planning? From the fortified towns of France to the trading hubs of Italy, we'll see firsthand how medieval ingenuity created cities that are not just beautiful, but are living museums of urban design. So, get ready to see these historical cities in a whole new light. We're going beyond the usual tourist spots to uncover the hidden logic and brilliant design embedded in their very foundations. It's going to be a fascinating journey into the heart of a bygone era, and I can't wait to share it with you. If you love history, architecture, or just exploring unique places, make sure you hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you don't miss a single episode. Thanks for joining me, and I'll see you in our first Time Capsule City. Ever wondered what life was really like in the Middle Ages? Forget the fairy tales for a moment. Picture this: a world of constant uncertainty, where the threat of attack wasn't a distant fear, but a daily reality. How did people survive? How did they build communities, businesses, and entire cultures in such a turbulent time? The answer, etched in stone across the landscapes of Europe, Asia, and beyond, is the city wall. Welcome to our journey into the heart of the medieval city. And our story begins with its most fundamental feature, the walls. These weren't just simple barriers. They were the very foundation of urban life, the first and most crucial investment a community could make. Think about it. Before you can have a bustling market, a grand cathedral, or a peaceful neighborhood, you need one thing above all else: security. Imagine the sheer scale of the undertaking. We're talking about massive fortifications, sometimes miles long, several feet thick, and towering high above the surrounding landscape. The clang of hammers on stone, the shouts of masons, the creak of wooden cranes lifting massive blocks into place. This was the soundtrack of a city's birth. Building these walls wasn't a quick job. It was a project that could span generations. Fathers, sons, and grandsons might all contribute their labor to the same stretch of wall. It was a communal effort, born from a shared need for protection. Why go to all this trouble? The reasons were as solid as the stones themselves. First and foremost, defense. The medieval world was fragmented. Without a strong central authority like the Roman Empire, local lords, rival cities, and opportunistic raiding parties were a constant menace. A sturdy wall was the difference between a city that thrived and one that was plundered and burned. It meant that at night, when the city gates were barred and locked, the people inside, the blacksmiths, the bakers, the merchants, the children, could sleep with a measure of peace. But the walls were more than just a shield against invaders. They were powerful symbols. Approaching a walled city was an awe-inspiring experience. The height and strength of the fortifications sent a clear message to all who saw them. This is a place of power, wealth, and order. We are strong, we are organized, and we are not to be trifled with. The wall was a statement of sovereignty. It physically marked the boundary between the controlled, lawful space of the city and the wild, unpredictable world outside. It established jurisdiction. Inside the walls, the city's laws applied. Outside, you were on your own. This clear demarcation had a profound psychological effect. A wall created a sense of identity, of belonging. To be a citizen of a walled town was to be part of a protected, privileged community. It fostered a unique urban culture, distinct from the rural life of the surrounding countryside. Furthermore, the wall dictated the very shape and growth of the city. The initial footprint was defined by the first circuit of walls. As the population grew, space inside became a precious commodity. This led to the narrow, winding streets and densely packed houses we often associate with medieval towns. Every square foot was valuable. Sometimes, if a city became successful enough, it would outgrow its original defenses, and a new, larger set of walls would be constructed, enclosing the newly developed suburbs. You can still see these successive rings of growth in the street plans of many old European cities today. The wall wasn't just a passive structure. It was an active part of city life. The gates were the arteries of the city, controlling the flow of people and goods. They were the customs checkpoints, where tolls and taxes were collected on every cart of grain, every bolt of cloth, every barrel of wine that entered. This revenue was vital, often funding the maintenance of the walls themselves and other civic projects. The guards at the gate weren't just soldiers. They were the city's first line of administration. So, when we look at the ruins of a medieval city wall today, we're not just seeing an old pile of rocks. We are looking at the cornerstone of a civilization. We're seeing a testament to a community's will to survive, their ambition to prosper, and their vision for a stable future in a chaotic world. It was the physical manifestation of safety, order, and identity. The wall wasn't just around the city. In many ways, it was the city. Imagine approaching one of these colossal structures. You're not just facing one set of doors. First, you might have to cross a drawbridge over a deep, menacing moat. Even if you make it across, you're not in the clear. You'd likely find yourself in a barbican, an outer courtyard designed as a death trap. Archers and soldiers would be looking down on you from all sides, from arrow slits in the walls of towering gatehouses. There's no cover, nowhere to hide. This space was built to funnel attackers into a concentrated kill zone before they even reached the main gate. And that main gate, picture doors made of solid oak, several inches thick, strapped and studded with heavy iron to resist battering rams and fire. Behind those doors, a heavy iron or wooden grate, a portcullis, hangs poised, ready to slam down in an instant, trapping anyone caught underneath or splitting an attacking force in two. Sometimes there wasn't just one portcullis, but two or even three, creating a series of deadly chambers within the gatehouse itself. If you breached the first gate, you'd find yourself trapped in a small, enclosed space, with guards above dropping rocks, pouring boiling oil, or firing crossbows through murder holes in the ceiling. It was a brutal, terrifying, and incredibly effective system. Every single element, from the angle of the approach to the height of the towers, was meticulously planned to give the defenders every possible advantage. But these gates weren't just instruments of war. They were the heart and soul of the city's daily life, its administrative and economic nerve center. Think of them as the ancient equivalent of a modern airport's customs and immigration. Day in and day out, a constant stream of people flowed through. Merchants with carts piled high with goods, farmers bringing their produce to market, pilgrims on a sacred journey, messengers carrying vital news. They all had to pass through the gates. This is where the guards came in. They weren't just there to fight off armies. They were the city's regulators. They inspected wagons and parcels, on the lookout for smuggled goods or hidden weapons. They were the ones who collected the tolls and taxes that funded the city's treasury. Every merchant had to pay a fee based on the type and quantity of goods they were bringing in. This revenue was essential for maintaining the city's roads, public buildings, and of course, the defenses themselves. The guards were the gatekeepers in every sense of the word, deciding who was trustworthy enough to enter the city walls and who was turned away. They were also the city's information hub. The guards would know who was coming and going. They'd hear the latest news and rumors from traveling merchants, and they'd be the first to greet visiting dignitaries or spot poaching threats. Their post in the gatehouse wasn't just a defensive position. It was a front-row seat to the world. They were the eyes and ears of the city, controlling the flow of not just people and goods, but information as well. Furthermore, the gates were powerful symbols of civic pride and authority. They were often the most ornate and impressive structures in the entire city, aside from perhaps the cathedral or the ruler's palace. Grand, ceremonial entrances were designed to awe and intimidate visitors. Imagine a foreign ambassador arriving not at a simple opening in a wall, but at a monumental gateway adorned with statues, coats of arms, and intricate carvings, all designed to proclaim the wealth, power, and prestige of the city within. Walking through such a gate was a statement in itself. It told you that you were entering a place of importance, a center of civilization protected and governed by a formidable power. So the next time you see a castle or a walled city in a movie or a book, pay close attention to the gates. They are so much more than just an entrance. They are a complex machine of defense, a bustling center of commerce, a symbol of power, and a fascinating window into the daily life of the past. They perfectly represent the dual nature of the city itself, a fortress built for war, but also a vibrant hub built for life and trade. They literally defined who was in and who was out, shaping the very identity of the community they protected. Within the heart of the medieval city, often towering over the bustling streets and humble rooftops, stood a symbol of ultimate authority and a final bastion of defense, the citadel or the urban castle. These weren't just part of the city. In many ways, they were the city's origin, its nucleus of power from which everything else grew. Imagine walking through a crowded marketplace, the smells of spices and livestock filling the air, the sounds of merchants haggling and children playing all around you. Then you look up. Dominating the skyline is a formidable stone keep, its walls thick and unyielding, its banners snapping in the wind. This was the inner sanctum, a fortress within a fortress, designed as the last refuge for the ruling elect, be it the lord, the king, or a powerful bishop, should the outer walls ever fall. Let's listen closely. Can you hear it? The heavy, groaning creak of a massive portcullis being raised. The rhythmic tramp of guards' boots on the battlements, their distant shouts echoing down into the streets below. The rustle of a silk standard bearing the coat of arms of the city's master. These sounds were a constant reminder to every citizen of who held the power. The castle was a stark, physical projection of authority, a silent declaration that while the city belonged to its people, it was ruled by its lord. These inner strongholds were far more than just military installations. They were the administrative nerve centers of the entire region. Inside these walls, laws were written, justice was dispensed, and taxes were collected. The very layout of the city often bent to the will of the castle. The main thoroughfares didn't just lead to the market. They led to the castle gates, ensuring that trade, resources, and soldiers could be moved efficiently under the watchful eye of the ruler. Think of the concentric rings of a tree. The castle was the very core, the heartwood. The first ring around it might be the homes of the most trusted knights and officials. The next ring could be the workshops of artisans who served the castle directly: armorers, blacksmiths, and fletchers. The economic life of the city pulsed in rhythm with the needs of its citadel. If the lord was preparing for war, the forges would burn day and night. If he was hosting a feast, the city's markets would be scoured for the finest goods. The relationship between the city and its castle was complex, a delicate balance of protection and control. The castle offered security from outside invaders, a promise of safety that drew people to settle under its shadow. In times of siege, the citizens might find refuge within its outer bailies, but it was also a tool of subjugation. A rebellious town could find its own castle turned against it, a constant threat looming over their homes. The lord could lock his gates, cutting off the city from its leadership, or sally forth to impose his will. Let's explore some famous examples. In London, the Tower of London, originally built by William the Conqueror, was a royal palace, a prison, and a fortress all in one. It was deliberately placed just outside the old Roman city walls, a clear statement to the powerful London merchants that a new Norman king was in charge. Similarly, in Paris, the original Louvre was a fortress built by King Philip II to defend the western edge of the city, its imposing structure defining the urban landscape for centuries. In many Italian city-states, the ruling families built fortified tower houses right in the city center, their private fortresses jostling for dominance in the skyline. The architecture of these urban castles tells a story of evolving warfare and politics. Early on, you might see a simple Motte and Bailey design, a wooden keep on a man-made hill. Over time, these were replaced by massive, sophisticated stone structures with concentric walls, gatehouses armed with murder holes, and soaring towers that gave a commanding view of the entire surrounding area. Every architectural feature was a response to a threat, a calculation of risk and defense. These citadels were also social and cultural centers for the aristocracy. Within their walls were grand halls for feasting, private chapels for worship, and elegant gardens for leisure. While the common folk lived in cramped, timber-framed houses, the castle was a world of stone, tapestries, and relative luxury, a stark contrast that reinforced the rigid social hierarchy of the medieval world. It was a place of high politics and courtly intrigue, where the fate of thousands could be decided over a cup of wine or a secret conversation in a shadowy corridor. So the next time you see a castle in the middle of an old European city, don't just see it as a picturesque ruin. See it for what it was: the heart, the brain, and the iron fist of the medieval city. It was the anchor that secured the community, the engine that drove its economy, and the ever-present symbol of a power that could be both a protector and an oppressor. It was the ultimate inner sanctum, where the story of the city was truly written. Let's dive into the heart of a typical medieval city. Forget the neat, orderly grids you see in modern cities like New York. That level of top-down planning was a luxury most medieval communities couldn't afford. Their primary concern wasn't a smooth commute. It was defense. Survival was the name of the game. Walls were everything. They were the city's shield, its boundary, and in a way, its prison. Imagine a settlement starting as a small cluster of houses around a castle or a monastery. As the population grew, new houses would spring up, following the natural curves of the land, tracing the path of an old Roman road, or simply filling in whatever empty space was available. The streets weren't designed. They evolved. They were paths people walked, which then got paved, with buildings lining them on either side. This is what we call organic growth. These winding, narrow streets weren't a design flaw. They were a feature. Think about it from a defender's perspective. If an invading army breached the outer wall, they wouldn't find a straight, wide avenue leading to the city center. Instead, they'd be funneled into a confusing labyrinth. Every blind corner was a potential ambush point. It was difficult for large groups of soldiers to move quickly, and impossible for cavalry to charge effectively. The city's very layout became a secondary line of defense, a passive weapon that confused and slowed down any attacker. It's a brilliant example of form following function, where the function is, don't get conquered. But what happens when you run out of space? Those big, beautiful walls that kept everyone safe also put a hard limit on horizontal expansion. You couldn't just build a new suburb outside the gates. That would be suicide. So, cities had to grow in the only direction they could, up. This is why medieval cityscapes are so distinct. Houses were built taller and taller, often with upper floors jutting out over the street below. These jetties served a dual purpose. They maximized the living space on a small plot of land, and as a side effect, made the streets below even darker and more enclosed, further adding to that labyrinthine feel. Life within these walls became incredibly dense. Public squares were precious, and every square foot of land was valuable. This density fostered a unique kind of community. Neighbors lived practically on top of each other. The street was an extension of the home, a place for business, socializing, and news. It was noisy, probably smelly, but vibrant and full of life. The city was a living organism, constantly adapting and shifting within its stone shell. Now, it would be wrong to say that no medieval cities were planned. While organic growth was the norm, there were fascinating exceptions. Take the Bastides of southern France, for example. These were entirely new towns, built from scratch, often during the 13th and 14th centuries. They were founded by kings or powerful lords for a variety of reasons: to secure territory, to promote trade, or to establish a military stronghold in a contested region. Unlike their organically grown cousins, Bastides were often laid out on a strict grid plan. They featured a central arcaded market square, with streets running at right angles to each other. It was a model of efficiency and control. The grid made it easy to divide up and sell plots of land, and it provided a clear, orderly structure for a new community. But even these planned cities were enclosed by defensive walls. The grid was contained, a rational plan locked within the practical necessity of defense. So you'd have this fascinating contrast, an orderly interior and a hard defensive perimeter. These planned cities show us that medieval builders were perfectly capable of creating rational, geometric layouts when the situation called for it. The choice between organic growth and a planned grid wasn't about a lack of knowledge. It was about circumstances. Most older, larger cities like London or Paris had a core that grew organically over centuries. Newer, purpose-built towns, the Bastides, were planned from day one. So we see two main models coexisting. On one hand, you have the ancient, sprawling cities that grew like a tree, with roots, a trunk, and branches spreading in every direction that opportunity and terrain allowed. Their charm lies in their unpredictability, the sense of history etched into every crooked lane and hidden courtyard. On the other hand, you have the more rational, planned settlements, which tell a story of power, colonization, and the desire to impose order on the landscape. What's truly incredible is how the defensive wall shaped both types of cities. It was the ultimate constraint. For the organic city, it forced vertical growth and incredible density, creating the time capsule cities we love to explore today. The wall squeezed the city, concentrating life and energy within its embrace. For the planned city, the wall defined the limits of the plan, creating a self-contained, fortified world. The wall was more than just stone and mortar. It was the single most important factor in a medieval city's development. It dictated where people could live, how they built their homes, and even how they moved around. The relationship between the wall and the streets within it is a perfect example of adaptation. The city was a living system that had to balance the need for security with the pressures of a growing population. Think of it this way. The wall is the pot, and the city is the plant. In an organic city, the plant grows to fill the pot in any way it can, its roots and stems twisting to find every bit of soil and light. In a planned city, the gardener has carefully arranged the seeds in neat rows, but they still can't grow beyond the confines of the pot. This dynamic interplay between defense and daily life, between rigid planning and chaotic growth, is what makes medieval cities so endlessly fascinating. They are not just collections of old buildings. They are physical records of the challenges and solutions of the past. The winding streets aren't a mistake. They read a testament to a time when your city's layout could be a matter of life and death. So the next time you're navigating the enchanting maze of a historic city center, take a moment to appreciate the genius behind it. You're walking through a solution to a 1,000-year-old problem. You're in a place shaped by the fundamental human needs for safety, community, and a place to call home. It's a beautiful, complex dance between chaos and order, and it's a story written in stone. Have you ever wondered what the true heart of a medieval city was? It wasn't the castle or the cathedral, but something far more vibrant, chaotic, and essential to everyday life. It was the market square. Close your eyes for a moment and picture it. It's not a quiet, neat little plaza. It's an absolute explosion for the senses. You're surrounded by the sounds of merchants shouting at the top of their lungs. Fresh fish, caught this morning. Or the finest silks from the East. You hear the clatter of coins as buyers and sellers haggle fiercely over every last penny. The air is thick with a dizzying mix of smells. The earthy aroma of fresh vegetables pulled from the ground, the sweet scent of baking bread, the sharp tang of exotic spices, and yes, the unmistakable smell of livestock being led through the crowd. This was the vibrant, beating heart of the city. These squares weren't just placed anywhere. City planners, even back then, were incredibly strategic. They deliberately located markets at crucial points, like major crossroads where trade routes converged, or right inside the city gates to catch travelers and merchants the second they arrived. This clever positioning ensured a constant flow of people and goods, making the market the city's central artery. It was designed for maximum traffic, maximum business, and maximum interaction. Think of it as the city's main engine, constantly humming with the energy of commerce. Everything and everyone, from the wealthiest merchant to the humblest farmer, was drawn into its orbit, making it the undeniable economic powerhouse of the urban landscape. But the market square was so much more than just a place to buy and sell. It was the city's living room, its social media feed, and its news station, all rolled into one sprawling, open-air space. This is where you'd catch up on all the local gossip. Who was getting married? Whose business was failing? Did you hear about the scandal involving the blacksmith's apprentice? All of this vital information was exchanged over a barrel of apples, or while inspecting a bolt of cloth. It was also the official stage for public announcements. A town crier, bell in hand, would stand on a box and shout out new laws, royal decrees, or warnings of approaching armies. It was the place for public justice, where punishments were carried out for all to see. Imagine the sheer diversity of people you would encounter. You'd see farmers from the surrounding countryside, their faces weathered by the sun, proudly displaying the fruits of their labor. You'd rub shoulders with skilled artisans, weavers, cobblers, and potters, selling their handcrafted goods. You'd see traveling merchants with exotic items, and even more exotic stories from faraway lands. Housewives would be there, carefully selecting produce for the evening meal, while children darted through the crowds, perhaps trying to sneak a piece of fruit. Priests, nobles, soldiers, beggars, every single level of medieval society converged in this one dynamic space. It was a true melting pot, a place where destinies crossed and the entire community came together. The market square wasn't just in the city. It was the city. The market also dictated the physical and temporal rhythm of urban life. The city's layout often radiated outwards from the square, with the most important guilds and wealthiest merchants having their houses and shops fronting this prime real estate. The daily schedule of the city revolved around the market's opening and closing times, often signaled by the ringing of a bell. When the market was open, the city was alive, bustling with activity. When it closed, a sense of quiet would descend as people returned to their homes. The market was a living, breathing entity that pulsed with the life of the people, shaping their days, their livelihoods, and their connections to one another. It was the stage upon which the drama of medieval urban life played out every single day. Have you ever stood in an old European city and just felt small? You look up, and there it is, towering over everything else, a magnificent stone giant reaching for the sky. I'm talking about the cathedral, the heart and soul of the medieval city. These weren't just buildings. They were the city's spiritual command center, its landmark, its pride and joy, all rolled into one. Forget skyscrapers. For centuries, the spires of the local cathedral or main church were the undisputed kings of the skyline. Imagine walking through a bustling medieval town. The streets are narrow, the houses are packed together, and then you turn a corner, and bam! A huge open square appears, and dominating it is this incredible structure. Its sheer size would have been breathtaking. We're talking about buildings that took generations, sometimes centuries, to complete. They were, without a doubt, the largest, most expensive, and most ambitious construction projects of their time. Think of it as the medieval equivalent of a mission to Mars, a massive investment of money, skill, and most importantly, faith. Why go to all that trouble? Because the cathedral was literally seen as God's house on earth. Its very design was meant to inspire awe and draw your eyes, and your thoughts upward toward the heavens. Those soaring spires weren't just for show. They were symbolic pointers to the divine. It was a message written in stone. This city belongs to God. The entire community poured its resources into its construction. Rich merchants, powerful guilds, nobles, and even common folk would contribute, all to create a monument that reflected their collective faith and, let's be honest, their civic pride. A bigger, more beautiful cathedral meant a more important, more blessed city. It was a status symbol on an epic scale. Let's step inside. As your eyes adjust to the dim light, you'd be met with a kaleidoscope of color. Sunlight streams through massive stained glass windows, painting the stone floors and pillars in vibrant shades of ruby, sapphire, and emerald. These weren't just pretty decorations. They were the storybooks of the illiterate. Each window told a tale from the Bible, depicting saints, angels, and key moments from Scripture. For the average person who couldn't read, this was their visual guide to their faith, a divine comic book brought to life by light. The sheer scale of the interior, with its high vaulted ceilings that seemed to disappear into the heavens, was designed to make you feel both humbled and uplifted, a tiny part of something grand and eternal. And then there's the sound. The air would be thick with the smell of incense and melting wax, but it's the soundscape that truly defined the space. The murmur of prayers, the soaring notes of a choir echoing through the vast hall, and of course, the bells. The deep, resonant toll of the cathedral bells was the city's heartbeat. They marked the hours of the day, calling people to prayer, announcing important events like weddings or funerals, and warning of dangers like fire or attack. Their sound rolled across the rooftops, a constant reminder of the church's presence and its rhythm that structured daily life for everyone, whether they were inside the church or out in the fields. The cathedral's influence wasn't just spiritual or sensory. It literally shaped the city around it. The street layout often revolved around the cathedral and its main square. Think of it like a stone dropped in a pond. The ripples were the streets and alleys that radiated outwards or circled it. This central square, or plaza, wasn't just empty space. It was the city's main stage. It's where public life happened. Imagine religious processions winding their way through the streets, culminating in a grand ceremony right in front of the cathedral. Civic announcements were made here, markets were held, and sometimes even mystery plays were performed, bringing biblical stories to life for the masses. It was also a major economic engine. The construction itself employed hundreds of stonemasons, carpenters, glaziers, and artists. But even after completion, the cathedral was a magnet. It attracted pilgrims, sometimes from hundreds of miles away, who came to venerate a particular saint's relic housed within the church. These pilgrims were essentially tourists. They needed places to eat, sleep, and buy souvenirs. Inns, taverns, and shops selling religious trinkets sprang up in the cathedral's shadow, creating a bustling commercial district. The cathedral was a hub of spiritual, civic, and economic activity, all at once. So, when we look at these incredible structures, we're not just seeing old churches. We are looking at the physical embodiment of a society's worldview. They are testaments to an unwavering faith, monuments of incredible artistic and engineering skill, and symbols of the city's identity and ambition. They were the center of the universe for the people who built them, dominating their skyline, their daily schedules, and their spiritual lives. They were the anchors of the medieval world, a constant, towering presence that gave life meaning, structure, and a touch of the divine. The next time you see one, take a moment. Listen for the faint echo of the bells and imagine the world that was built in its magnificent shadow. Have you ever walked down a street where every shop sells the same thing? Like a whole block just for jewelry, or another just for shoes? Well, that idea isn't new. In fact, it was a defining feature of medieval cities. As these bustling urban centers grew, a new and powerful force emerged, the guilds. So, what exactly was a guild? Think of it as a mix between a trade union, a business association, and a social club, all rolled into one. If you were a skilled artisan, a blacksmith, a baker, a weaver, a carpenter, you belonged to a guild. These weren't just loose groups of friends. They were highly organized and influential bodies that shaped the very fabric of city life. One of the most visible results of the guild system was the creation of specialized districts. As guilds gained power, their members tended to cluster together. You'd find entire streets dedicated to a single trade. Imagine strolling through a medieval city. You'd turn a corner and suddenly, your ears would be filled with the rhythmic asterisk clang, clang, clang asterisk of hammers on anvils. The air would be thick with the smoky smell of coal and hot metal. You'd know, without a doubt, you are on the street of the blacksmiths. Walk a little further, and that metallic scent would give way to something far more delicious. The warm, comforting aroma of freshly baked bread would waft from every doorway. This would be the baker's quarter, a place of bustling ovens and flour-dusted apprentices. Then another turn, and your senses would be hit with a riot of color and the sharp, earthy smell of dyes. You'd see vibrant bolts of cloth hanging out to dry, shimmering in the sun. This was the weavers' and dyers' district, the heart of the city's textile trade. Each district had its own unique sensory landscape, its own sounds, its own smells. The shoemaker's street would smell of leather and wax, while the tanner's district, well, let's just say you'd probably want to hold your nose as you passed through that one. This clustering wasn't just for convenience. It created distinct neighborhood identities and made the city a vibrant, multi-sensory experience. It was a living map of the city's economy. But guilds did much more than just group people together. They were the ultimate regulators. Their primary goal was to protect their members' interests and maintain a high standard of quality. You couldn't just decide to open a bakery one day. First, you had to go through a rigorous apprenticeship, often lasting 7 years or more. You'd start as a young apprentice, living with a master craftsman, learning every secret of the trade from the ground up. Once you completed your apprenticeship, you became a journeyman, free to travel and work for other masters. To finally become a master yourself and open your own shop, you had to produce a masterpiece, a single perfect item that demonstrated your complete command of the craft. This piece would be judged by the senior members of the guild. Only if it met their exacting standards would you be granted the title of master and the right to run your own business within the city walls. This strict system ensured that customers could trust the products they bought. A loaf of bread from a guild-certified baker was guaranteed to be a certain weight and quality. A sword from a guild blacksmith was certified to be strong and reliable. The guild set the prices too, preventing cutthroat competition and ensuring that their members could make a decent living. They controlled the supply of raw materials and dictated working hours. In short, they had a stranglehold on the city's economy. This economic power was proudly displayed in their guild halls. These weren't just simple meeting rooms. Guild halls were often some of the most impressive and ornate buildings in the entire city, second only to the cathedral or the town hall. They were architectural marvels, built to project an image of wealth, stability, and power. These halls were the nerve center of the guild. It's where the masters would meet to set rules, inspect masterpieces, and settle disputes. It's where they would hold lavish banquets and celebrations. But more than that, the guild hall was a symbol. It was a brick-and-mortar statement of the guild's importance to the city. It showed everyone from the humblest citizen to the ruling lord that the artisans and merchants were a force to be reckoned with. They were not just workers. They were pillars of the urban community, contributing to its prosperity, its social structure, and its very identity. The guilds also functioned as a social safety net for their members. They took care of sick members and supported the widows and orphans of those who had passed away. They organized religious processions and funded chapels. This created a powerful sense of brotherhood and collective identity. Being a member of a guild meant you were part of a community that would support you from cradle to grave. So the next time you think about the structure of a city, remember the medieval guilds. They were the architects of the urban economy, the guardians of quality, and the heart of community life. Their legacy can still be seen in names of old city streets like London C, Bread Street, or Ironmonger Lane, and in the magnificent guild halls that still stand today, silent testaments to a time when craftsmanship and community reigned supreme. When you imagine a medieval city, what comes to mind? Towering castles, bustling marketplaces, knights in shining armor? Probably. But what about the things we take for granted today? Like turning on a tap for clean water, or flushing a toilet. It might not be as glamorous, but managing water and waste was one of the most critical challenges for any medieval town. Without it, these vibrant hubs of life could never have existed. Now, we're diving deep into the hidden infrastructure of the Middle Ages, exploring the ingenious, and sometimes stomach-turning, ways our ancestors kept their cities alive. Let's start with the lifeblood of any community, fresh water. As towns grew into cities, a local stream or a single well just wasn't enough. The demand for water was immense, for drinking, cooking, washing, and for industries like tanning and brewing. So, how did they get it? For some lucky cities, the answer lay in resurrecting ancient Roman genius. They repaired and even built new aqueducts, massive stone channels that carried fresh water from springs miles away, straight into the heart of the city. It was a colossal undertaking, a testament to medieval engineering, and a huge investment for any community. Once the water arrived, it had to be distributed. This is where the conduits came in. Think of them as the city's arteries. Often made of lead or hollowed-out elm logs, these pipes ran beneath the streets, feeding public fountains and cisterns. These fountains weren't just water sources. They were social hubs. People gathered there to collect water, wash clothes, and catch up on the latest gossip. They were the original water coolers. These structures were often ornate, decorated with carvings and sculptures, a point of civic pride that showed off the city as wealth and its commitment to its citizens' well-being. Of course, not every town could afford an aqueduct. The most common solution was the communal well. Digging a deep, reliable well was a skilled and expensive job, but absolutely essential. These wells, often located in the main square, were the center of daily life. For the wealthiest households, the ultimate luxury was a private well in their own courtyard. This was a major status symbol, offering convenience and a guarantee of a cleaner water source, away from the contamination of the public supply. But for most people, the daily trip to the well or fountain was a fundamental part of their routine. Now let's talk about the less glamorous side of the equation. What goes in must come out. Managing waste in a densely packed city was a monumental task. The simplest and most common solution for household waste, everything from food scraps to human waste, was the cesspit. This was essentially a lined pit dug in the backyard or basement. When it got full, a team of specialized workers, known as gong farmers or nightmen, would be hired to empty it. It was a dirty, smelly, and dangerous job, and they were only allowed to work at night to minimize the stench and disruption for the rest of the city. For those without private facilities, public latrines were the answer. These were often built over rivers or streams, using the flowing water to carry the waste away. London Bridge, for example, was famous for its Long House, a public toilet with over 100 seats that emptied directly into the River Thames below. While it might seem disgusting to us, it was a practical, if imperfect, solution. It shows a clear understanding that waste needed to be removed from living areas. However, as you can imagine, this had a pretty devastating effect on the water quality downstream. The streets themselves were another major part of the waste disposal system. Most streets had a central channel, or kennel, running down the middle. People would simply toss their household waste, including the contents of their chamber pots, out of the window into the street, with the hope that the next rain would wash it all away. You can imagine the smell, especially in the dry summer months. There were laws, of course. People were supposed to shout a warning like, "Gardez-le," from the French, "Gardez l'eau," or "watch out for the water," before tossing their waste, but accidents surely happened. This constant battle against filth wasn't just about smell and inconvenience. It was a matter of life and death. Medieval people may not have understood germ theory, but they made a clear connection between filth and disease. They knew that contaminated water and overflowing cesspits led to sickness. City councils passed numerous regulations to try and keep things clean. They hired scavengers to sweep the streets, imposed fines for illegal dumping, and tried to regulate polluting industries, like butcheries, forcing them to operate in designated areas, usually downstream. For example, in 14th century London, the city's leaders recognized the Thames was becoming an open sewer. They created a special commission to clean up the river and stop people from dumping waste into it. They even built a new, large public latrine away from the main water intakes. These weren't isolated efforts. Across Europe, city governments were actively trying to manage public health. They understood that a clean city was a healthy city, and a healthy city was a prosperous one. Their methods were rudimentary by our standards, but they represent the very first steps in urban public health planning. So, while the medieval city might seem a world away from our modern, sanitized lives, the core challenges were the same. They needed to provide clean water and get rid of waste to support a large population. Their solutions, from gravity-fed aqueducts to the nightly rounds of the gong farmer, were a mix of brilliant engineering, pragmatic policy, and sheer necessity. It is a powerful reminder that the foundations of our modern cities were laid hundreds of years ago in the mud and mucked by people who understood that civilization depends on the complex hidden systems that keep it flowing. Now, when we imagine a medieval city, we often think of a place that grew up organically over centuries. A path becomes a street, a cluster of houses becomes a neighborhood, all expanding outwards from an ancient core like the rings of a tree. But what if I told you that hundreds of towns in France didn't grow this way at all? They were planned, designed, and built from scratch on empty land with a ruler and a blueprint. These planned communities are known as bastides, and they represent a revolutionary idea for their time. Think of it like this. Instead of letting a town sprout randomly, powerful lords, kings, and even religious orders decided to build new urban centers with specific goals in mind. We're talking about the 12th, 13th, and 14th centuries, a period of significant change and conflict in Europe. So why go to all the trouble of building a town from nothing? The motivations were incredibly strategic. First, there was defense. The region of Aquitaine, where most bastides are found, was a contested frontier, especially during the 100 Years' War between England and France. Building a fortified town was like placing a strategic piece on a giant chessboard. It established a military stronghold, secured territory, and projected power. These weren't just collections of houses. They were defensive outposts populated by loyal subjects. Second, there was a powerful economic driver. By creating a new town, a lord could create a new market. They could attract merchants, artisans, and farmers from the surrounding countryside, stimulating trade and generating tax revenue. Offering land and certain freedoms was a powerful incentive. Peasants and serfs, who were often tied to their lord's land, could gain a new level of personal and economic freedom by moving to a bastide. It was a win-win. The lord got a thriving economic hub, and the new residents, or pobladores, got a fresh start and a better life. And finally, there was colonization and control. Building a bastide was a way to populate sparsely inhabited areas, clear forests, and cultivate new farmland. It was a method of stamping authority on the landscape, turning wild territory into an ordered, productive part of a kingdom or duchy. So, how did they do it? The layout of a bastide is what makes it truly remarkable and distinct. Forget the labyrinthine alleys of older cities. The planners of the bastides, often inspired by ancient Roman grid systems, favored logic and order. At the heart of almost every bastide is a central square, the asterisk place, central asterisk. This wasn't just an open space. It was the social, political, and commercial nucleus of the town. It was a marketplace, a gathering spot, and the site of public announcements. Often, this square is arcaded, with covered walkways called cornières running along the sides. These arcades provided shelter from the sun and rain, allowing commerce and social life to continue regardless of the weather. Imagine merchants setting up their stalls under these arches, townspeople haggling over goods, and neighbors catching up on the latest news. This central square was the town's beating heart. Radiating out from this central square is a grid of straight, intersecting streets, creating a checkerboard pattern. This gridiron plan was incredibly efficient. It made it easy to divide the land into standardized plots, called *lots*. These plots were then allocated to the new settlers. Each settler would typically receive a parcel of land in town for their house and workshop, known as an *arrow*, and another plot of land outside the town walls for a garden or small farm, called a *castle*. This standardized layout was the essence of the bastide's design. It ensured fairness in the distribution of land and made navigation simple. It also had defensive advantages. Straight streets allowed for the rapid movement of troops from one part of the town to another in case of an attack. The entire grid was usually enclosed by a fortified wall with watchtowers and formal gates, completing the picture of a well-ordered and defensible settlement. The church, interestingly, was often not on the main square, but placed slightly off to the side, emphasizing that the bastide's primary function was commercial and civic, rather than purely religious. Let's explore a few stunning examples to bring this to life. First, there's Montpensier, located in the Dordogne region. Often called the model bastide, Montpensier is a breathtakingly well-preserved example founded in 1284 by King Edward I of England. Walking through Montpensier today feels like stepping directly into the 13th century. Its central square is perfectly preserved, with its beautiful arcades and original market hall. The grid of streets is almost completely intact, and you can clearly see the rational, geometric vision of its founders. Then there's Cords sur Ciel, which translates to chords on the sky. While it has a slightly less rigid grid due to its dramatic hilltop location, it embodies the defensive purpose of a bastide. Founded in 1222 by the Count of Toulouse to protect his lands, its high perch and formidable fortifications made it nearly impregnable. Its Gothic houses and winding, steep streets offer a glimpse into the wealth it accumulated through trade in leather and textiles. And we can't forget Mirepoix. After the original town was destroyed by a flood in 1289, it was rebuilt on the other side of the river as a classic bastide. Today, its central square is one of the most beautiful in France, famous for its colorful timber-framed houses resting on wooden pillars, creating a magnificent covered arcade. It's a vibrant, living example of the bastide concept, where the medieval marketplace is still a hub of activity. What's fascinating is that these towns weren't just architectural experiments. They were social experiments, too. The charter, or asterisk charte de coutumes asterisk, that each bastide received was a legal document that outlined the rights and responsibilities of its inhabitants. These charters often granted a level of freedom unheard of in the feudal countryside. Residents might be exempt from certain taxes, have the right to elect their own town officials, and be granted ownership of their property. This was a radical departure from the feudal system and was a huge draw for people looking to improve their station in life. The legacy of the bastides is profound. They show us that medieval society was capable of incredible foresight, planning, and sophisticated urban design. They challenge our stereotype of the Dark Ages as a time of chaos and stagnation. Instead, we see a dynamic period of innovation, where rulers used urban planning as a tool for economic development, military strategy, and social engineering. These towns are not just historical relics. Many are still thriving communities today. Their central squares continue to host markets. Their streets are lined with shops and homes, and their logical layout still makes them easy and pleasant places to live. They stand as a testament to a deliberate and rational approach to creating a community, an approach that prioritized order, efficiency, and a new kind of civic life. It's a powerful reminder that the desire to build better, more organized, and more prosperous cities is not a modern invention, but a dream that has been pursued for centuries. So next time you find yourself wandering through a perfectly gridded town in southwestern France, take a moment to appreciate the vision behind it. You're not just in a beautiful old town. You're in a meticulously planned city, a bastide, born from the ambition and ingenuity of the Middle Ages. The Middle Ages weren't just about villages organically growing into cities. It was also an era of deliberate, ambitious, and strategic urban creation. So, let's step beyond the bastides. Imagine we're traveling across the vast landscapes of medieval Europe. We might find ourselves in what is now Germany, Poland, or the Czech Republic. Here, rulers, bishops, and powerful lords were actively founding new settlements from scratch. This wasn't a haphazard process. It was a calculated move, often driven by powerful economic and strategic incentives. Why would someone go to the immense trouble and expense of building a town from the ground up? Well, for a start, think about economics. A new town with a marketplace became a magnet for trade. It generated revenue through taxes on goods sold, tolls for using bridges and gates, and rent from property. This was a direct injection of cash into a lord's treasury. By granting a town a charter, a legal document outlining its rights and privileges, founder could attract skilled artisans, merchants, and farmers looking for new opportunities, and a degree of freedom they couldn't find in a traditional feudal village. These charters were incredibly important. They often promised things like personal freedom after living in the town for a year. And a day, the right to have a town council, and the privilege of holding a weekly market or an annual fair. These weren't just perks. They were powerful magnets, drawing people from all over to populate these new settlements and make them thrive. This process, often called the German eastward expansion, or *Ostsiedlung*, saw the foundation of hundreds of new towns in Central and Eastern Europe, fundamentally reshaping the demographic and economic map of the continent. But it wasn't just about money. Strategy was paramount. Picture a contested borderland or a sparsely populated region. Planting a fortified new town, it was a brilliant strategic move. It acted as a defensive stronghold, a center for administration, and a clear statement of territorial control. A well-placed town could secure a river crossing, guard a mountain pass, or serve as a base for further expansion. These towns were anchors of power, projecting the authority of their founder, be it a king, a duke, or a powerful religious order like the Teutonic Knights, into the surrounding countryside. So what did these planned towns actually look like? While they weren't all identical, they often shared some key design principles. Instead of the winding, organic streets of older cities that grew around a castle or monastery, these new towns were often laid out with a striking degree of regularity. The heart of the town was almost always a large, central marketplace. This wasn't just a place to shop. It was the civic and commercial core of the entire community. The town hall, the main church, and the wealthiest merchants' houses would typically front this main square. From this central square, the streets would often radiate outwards, or more commonly, be laid out in a grid or parallel pattern. This created standardized building plots, known as burgage plots. These were typically long, narrow parcels of land with a house fronting the street and a long garden or workspace stretching out behind. This layout was efficient, easy to survey and divide, and allowed for dense but orderly settlement. It was a practical solution that offered a blueprint for rapid development. Let's take a look at a few examples. Consider a town like Freiburg in Breisgau in Germany, founded in the 12th century. Its plan includes a main street that widens to create a market area with a network of smaller streets running parallel. Or think of the many towns founded under Magdeburg law, a set of town privileges so influential that it was adopted by hundreds of new settlements across Central and Eastern Europe. These towns often shared similar layouts centered on a large rectangular market square. What is so compelling about these new foundations is that they offer us a direct glimpse into the medieval mindset of order, commerce, and governance. When given a clean slate, medieval planners didn't default to chaos. They implemented logical, functional, and often beautiful designs. They understood the flow of people and goods. They knew how to create a defensible perimeter and a vibrant civic center. These new towns were engines of change. They fostered a growing middle class of merchants and craftsmen, introduced new legal concepts of freedom and self-governance, and spurred economic growth across the continent. They were a conscious act of creation, a testament to the ambition and foresight of their founders. They show us that the Middle Ages were not a static, unchanging era, but a dynamic period of innovation and expansion, quite literally building the foundations of modern Europe, one planned town at a time. Studying these settlements from Germany to Poland, from Italy to England, reveals a shared European heritage of urban planning. It challenges the cliché of the Dark Ages and replaces it with a picture of a sophisticated society capable of grand, long-term projects. These towns are the enduring legacy of medieval visionaries who saw a vacant field and pictured a bustling, prosperous city. In our last episode, we walked the bustling streets within the safety of the city walls. But what happened when that space was no longer enough? Now, we're stepping outside the gates to explore one of the most dynamic aspects of medieval urban life, the birth of the suburb. The word suburb itself tells a story. It comes from the Latin suburbium, meaning literally under the city or outside the city. In the medieval context, Think of it as under the burg, the fortified town. As trade flourished and populations boomed, the stone walls that once offered security started to feel a bit snug. People and industries began to spill out, creating new communities that hugged the outer perimeter of the city's defenses. Imagine standing at a city gate in the 13th century. Inside, it's packed. The air is thick with the smells of the market and the sounds of 100 different crafts. But now, look outside. Where there was once open farmland, you now see a sprawling new district. This isn't a planned, neat extension. It's an organic, almost chaotic explosion of growth. This is the suburb, a place of opportunity and risk. Who lived in these new areas? All sorts of people. New migrants arriving from the countryside, hoping to find work in the city, might settle here first. It was cheaper than living inside the walls, and you didn't need to be a formal citizen to set up shop. You'd also find specific industries pushed out here. Think of the nasty trades, tanners, dyers, butchers, whose work was smelly or required a lot of water. Pushing them outside the walls kept the city center a bit more pleasant for the wealthy merchants and nobles. The rhythmic thud of a fuller's hammer, the stench from the tanning pits, these were the sounds and smells of the suburban industrial zone. These areas weren't just for industry, though. They were vibrant communities in their own right. New parish churches were built, their bells ringing out to a congregation that lived beyond the main city's spiritual heart. Taverns and inns sprang up to cater to travelers and locals alike, creating lively social hubs. Markets specializing in particular goods, like livestock or timber, might be established in these open spaces, adding to the economic vitality. The suburb was a place of innovation, less constrained by the strict regulations of the guilds and city council inside the walls. It was a frontier, a place where new ideas and new fortunes could be made. Of course, living under the burg came with a significant downside, a lack of protection. Those magnificent stone walls that defined the city were also its primary defense. In an age of frequent warfare, living in a suburb meant you were on the front line. When an enemy army appeared on the horizon, the suburbs were the first to be looted and burned. Residents would have to grab what they could and flee inside the city gates, hoping there was room for them. This constant threat shaped the very character of suburban life, fostering a resilient and perhaps slightly fatalistic community. This uncontrolled growth presented a massive headache for the city authorities. How do you govern a population that lives outside your direct control? How do you collect taxes, enforce laws, and maintain order in these sprawling, often makeshift neighborhoods? Extending services was another major challenge. Paving streets, digging wells, and organizing sanitation were already monumental tasks within the walls. Doing so for a constantly expanding area outside was a logistical and financial nightmare. We see city councils constantly debating these issues in medieval records. They might try to regulate construction, ordering that new houses be built of stone instead of wood to reduce the fire risk, or attempt to extend the jurisdiction of the city watch into these lawless areas. Eventually, as a suburb grew prosperous and strategically important, the city faced a crucial decision. Do they leave this valuable extension of their city vulnerable, or do they undertake the colossal task of building new walls? This was not a decision taken lightly. Building a new, larger defensive perimeter was one of the most expensive and labor-intensive projects a medieval city could undertake. It required immense resources, political will, and years, sometimes decades, of construction. The process would involve quarrying and transporting thousands of tons of stone, organizing armies of masons and laborers, and raising special taxes that were often deeply unpopular. When a city did decide to expand its walls, it was a powerful statement. It was a formal recognition that the suburb had become an integral part of the city itself. The old walls, which once marked the edge of civilization, were now an internal barrier, with the new, grander walls defining the city's future. We can trace this process in the layout of many European cities today. You can often see concentric rings of old fortifications, like the rings of a tree, each one marking a past era of growth and the incorporation of what was once a vulnerable suburb. The story of the medieval suburb is the story of success. It shows that cities were not static, stone-bound entities. They were living, breathing organisms that constantly adapted and grew. The sprawl beyond the walls wasn't a sign of decay. It was a sign of incredible vitality, of an economy and a population that simply couldn't be contained. It demonstrates the powerful magnetic pull of the city, drawing people in and creating new worlds on its very doorstep. This dynamic of growth, risk, and eventual incorporation is a fundamental part of the medieval urban experience, proving that the city's story was always pushing outwards, beyond the walls. Ever strolled through a modern city park and wondered, where did people hang out before all this? It's a great question. When we picture a medieval city, we often imagine a maze of narrow, muddy streets, packed with timber-framed houses, and maybe a towering cathedral or a formidable castle. It sounds dense. And it was, but it wasn't a complete stone jungle. Hidden within and just outside those city walls were vital green spaces that served as the lungs of the medieval urban landscape. Let us peel back the layers of history and discover the parks and public spaces of the Middle Ages. While the concept of a public park, as we know it today, a space designed purely for leisure and open to everyone, is a more recent invention. Medieval cities were far from devoid of greenery. They had their own versions of public and semi-public spaces that were absolutely essential to daily life. These weren't just decorative afterthoughts. They were integral parts of the urban fabric, serving a multitude of purposes, from food production to spiritual retreat. So, where would a medieval city dweller go to get a breath of fresh air? Let's start with one of the most serene and well-tended places you could find, the monastic garden. Imagine stepping through a stone archway, leaving the noise and smell of the city behind, and entering a tranquil, ordered world. This was the reality of a monastic garden. Within the walls of monasteries and convents, monks and nuns cultivated incredible gardens that were models of efficiency and beauty. These weren't just for show. They were divided into specific areas with distinct purposes. There was the kitchen garden, or *hortus*, brimming with vegetables like leeks, onions, and cabbages, and herbs for cooking. This was the monastery's grocery store, providing daily sustenance for its inhabitants. Then you'd find the infirmary garden, which was essentially a living pharmacy. Here they grew medicinal herbs like lavender for calming nerves, rosemary to aid memory, and comfrey for healing wounds. The knowledge of herbal remedies was carefully preserved and passed down through generations of monastic life. Finally, there was the cloister garth, the central courtyard garden. This was a space for spiritual contemplation and quiet recreation, often featuring a central fountain or well, symbolizing the fountain of life and paths laid out in symbolic geometric patterns. It was designed to be paradise on earth, a place for monks to walk, pray, and connect with God through the beauty of nature. While not public in the sense that anyone could just wander in, these gardens were a vital green heart within many cities. Now, let's talk about a space that was much more accessible to the average person, the churchyard. Today, we think of churchyards primarily as cemeteries, but in the Middle Ages, their role was much broader and more lively. Yes, they were burial grounds, but they were also one of the most significant open public spaces within the city. Think of it as a multi-purpose community hub located right next to the most important building in town. Because the churchyard was consecrated ground, it was considered a sanctuary. This meant it was often used for markets and fairs, where merchants would set up stalls to sell their goods. It was a place for public announcements, for legal proceedings, and even for community celebrations and festivals. You might see a troupe of traveling actors putting on a play, or people gathering for a guild festival. Children would play among the gravestones, and people would meet to gossip and socialize. It was a space where the sacred and the secular, the living and the dead, all coexisted. It provided a crucial open area for public life to unfold, a stark contrast to the cramped private dwellings that most people called home. Of course, we can't talk about a medieval city without mentioning its most dominant feature, the castle. And just like monasteries, castles had their own important green spaces. The most obvious one is the castle courtyard, or bailey. This open area within the castle walls was a hive of activity. It served as a training ground for knights and soldiers, a place to drill and practice their martial skills. It was also where livestock could be sheltered during a siege, and where essential services like blacksmithing and carpentry took place. But castles weren't all work and no play. Many also contained private gardens for the lord and lady and their household. These were often inspired by the romantic literature of the time, designed as places of pleasure and courtly life. Known as a pleasance, such a garden might feature flowering plants, fragrant herbs, fruit trees, and grassy banks for sitting. Sometimes they even had small aviaries with songbirds, or little ponds with fish. These castle gardens were private retreats, symbols of wealth and status, offering the noble family a space for leisure and relaxation, a pocket of cultivated nature protected within the fortress walls. Beyond the dedicated gardens of the church and castle, there was another crucial type of green space, common land. Just inside, or more often, immediately outside the city walls, you would find areas of open pasture or meadows. These were the common grazing lands. Any citizen or burgher who owned livestock, perhaps a cow for milk, a few sheep for wool, or a pig, had the right to graze their animals on this shared land. This was incredibly important for the urban economy. It allowed even people living within a dense city to supplement their income and their diet. These commons weren't manicured parks. They were working landscapes. They were essential for providing milk, meat, and wool for the city's population. But they also served a secondary recreational purpose. On holidays and Sundays, these fields would become places for games, archery practice, and community gatherings. They acted as a natural buffer zone around the city and provided a direct, tangible connection to the agricultural world that sustained it. They were a constant reminder that even the biggest city was still deeply tied to the land. So, while you wouldn't find a medieval equivalent of Central Park with neat pathways and playgrounds, the medieval city was far from a gray monolith. It was a mosaic of different kinds of green spaces, each with its own purpose and character. You had the serene spiritual gardens of the monasteries, the bustling multifunctional churchyards, the private, pleasure-oriented castle gardens, and the practical, essential common lands. Each of these spaces, in its own way, provided a vital function. They offered room for food production, ensuring the city could feed itself. They provided spaces for recreation and socializing, which are crucial for any community's well-being. And they gave people a place for spiritual contemplation and a connection to the natural world. These green areas were the safety valves, the breathing spaces that made dense urban living not just possible, but vibrant. They offered a necessary respite from the noise, the crowds, and the pressures of medieval city life. So next time you see a patch of green in an old European city, take a closer look. It might be the last remnant of a medieval world where nature and the city were woven together in a fascinating and essential way. Step inside the bustling heart of any medieval city, and you'll find a building that pulses with power and ambition, the City Hall. Far more than just stone and mortar, this was the civic hub, the very nerve center of urban life. Imagine stepping through its grand doors. The air is thick with the scent of old parchment and beeswax. You can almost hear the low murmur of voices from behind heavy oak doors. Merchants debating new trade routes, guild masters arguing over standards, and city councilors crafting the very laws that will shape the lives of thousands. This wasn't a place for kings or bishops. This was a place for citizens. In these hallowed halls, the city's destiny was forged. Here, taxes were levied, not to fund a distant war, but to pave the streets you walked on, to build the walls that protected your family, and to maintain the marketplace where you earned your living. Every decision, from the price of bread to the punishment for petty theft, was debated and recorded right here. This was governance by the people, for the people, on a scale that was revolutionary for its time. The rise of the city hall tells a fascinating story of shifting power. For centuries, authority flowed from the top down, from the king, the noble lord, or the powerful bishop. But as cities grew wealthy from trade and craftsmanship, they began to demand a voice of their own. They negotiated, they paid, and sometimes they fought for charters of freedom, documents that granted them the right to govern themselves. The city hall became the ultimate symbol of this hard-won autonomy. Its architecture was often intentionally grand, designed to impress and even intimidate. Soaring towers and ornate facades were a bold declaration to the world, and especially to the local nobles, that the city was a power in its own right. It was a physical manifestation of the collective will and identity of the urban community. It stood as a proud testament to the idea that a city was more than just a collection of individuals. It was a single, unified body with its own voice and its own power. This shift wasn't always smooth. City councils often found themselves in a delicate dance of power with traditional authorities. They might have to negotiate with a local lord over land rights, or clash with a bishop over legal jurisdiction. The city hall was the stage for these dramas, a battleground of wits and diplomacy where the future of urban independence was decided. It was in these chambers that the modern concept of civic administration and self-governance truly began to take root. Think about the people who walked these corridors. Not just the wealthy council members, but also the clerks, painstakingly copying laws with quill and ink. The city treasurer, carefully counting out coins and balancing the ledgers. The bailiffs, receiving their orders to maintain peace in the streets. It was a complex living institution, a bureaucracy in miniature, dedicated to the complex task of making a city function day in and day out. So the next time you see a historic town hall in an old European city, take a moment to appreciate its significance. It's not just a beautiful old building. It's a monument to the birth of civic power, a symbol of the moment when ordinary people came together and declared, "We will govern ourselves." It represents the enduring spirit of community and the timeless quest for self-determination that shaped the world we live in today. Step into the shadows of the medieval city, a world not just of bustling markets and soaring cathedrals, but also of stern justice and unyielding law. Now, we're venturing beyond the cheerful facades to explore the city's darker side, its legal quarters and prisons. What did justice actually look like for the average person? How was order maintained when life was so often precarious? Join me as we unlock the heavy doors of medieval law enforcement. Imagine a section of the city where the architecture itself seems to frown. The buildings are stark, the windows are barred, and the air hangs heavy with a sense of dread. This was the legal quarter. It wasn't just one building, but a whole complex dedicated to the city's authority. Here, you'd find the courthouse, the jail, the sheriff's office, and perhaps even the executioner's lodgings. This concentration of power sent a clear message to every citizen. The law is always watching. Let's start with the courthouse. Forget the polished wood and quiet dignity we expect today. A medieval courtroom was often a chaotic, noisy, and public affair. It might be a dedicated hall, or simply a designated space in the town hall, or even a large church. Here, a judge or a panel of aldermen, the city's elite, would hear cases ranging from petty theft and trade disputes to more serious crimes like assault and murder. Evidence was often based on witness testimony, confessions, and sometimes trial by ordeal, though this became less common in later periods. The proceedings were conducted in a language most people didn't fully understand, Latin or formal legal. French instantly putting the common person at a disadvantage. Imagine standing before powerful men, accused of a crime, unable to fully grasp the legal arguments being made against you. The tension would have been immense. These courts weren't just about finding the truth. They were about demonstrating the power of the ruling class and reinforcing the social hierarchy. Right next door, or often in the basement of the courthouse itself, was the city jail. Medieval prisons weren't primarily for long-term punishment, as we think of them. They were mostly holding pens. You were thrown in while awaiting trial, or if you couldn't pay a debt or a fine. Conditions were, to put it mildly, horrific. These were dark, damp, and incredibly crowded dungeons. There was no sanitation, disease was rampant, and prisoners were often chained to walls or floors. Food and water weren't guaranteed. Your survival depended on friends or family bringing you supplies. If you had money, you could bribe the jailer for better conditions, a private cell, better food, maybe even some straw to sleep on. If you were poor, you were left to rot in the filth with dozens of others. The clanging of heavy iron doors, the constant murmurs and groans of the accused, the stench. It was a living nightmare designed to break your spirit before you even faced the judge. These prisons were a physical manifestation of the city's power to deprive a person of their most basic freedom. Now, let's talk about punishment. For the medieval mind, justice needed to be seen to be done. Punishments were public spectacles, designed to deter others and reinforce the moral order. For minor offenses, public humiliation was a common tool. A baker who sold underweight bread might be paraded through the streets with a loaf tied around his neck. A gossip might be forced to wear a scold's bridle, an iron mask that held the tongue down. The stocks and the pillory, set up in the busiest market square, were a favorite. Offenders would be locked in, helpless, for hours or even days, at the mercy of the public who could throw rotten vegetables, mud, or insults. It was social enforcement at its most visceral. But for more serious crimes, the punishments were far grislier. The city's authority was most starkly displayed at the place of public execution. The gallows, a permanent and foreboding structure, often stood on a hill just outside the city walls or in a prominent square, a constant reminder of the ultimate penalty. Executions were major public events. People would gather, sometimes in a festive atmosphere, to watch. It was a day out for the family, a grim form of entertainment, but also a powerful civic lesson. The procession of the condemned from the jail to the gallows was a slow, deliberate ritual. A priest would walk alongside, urging repentance. The final moments, the reading of the sentence, the last words of the condemned, and the act itself were pure theater, designed to instill fear and respect for the law. The methods varied depending on the crime and the status of the condemned. Hanging was common for thieves and rebels. More heinous crimes might call for more brutal methods, meant to reflect the severity of the sin. These acts weren't hidden away. They were the climactic final scene in the drama of justice. By making the ultimate punishment a public spectacle, the city wasn't just disposing of a criminal. It was performing a ritual of purification, cleansing the community of a corrupting influence and reasserting its absolute control. So, the legal quarters and prisons were far more than just buildings. They were the very heart of the city's system of control. The judge's bench, the dark cell, the pillory in the square, and the gallows on the hill each was a critical piece of the machinery that maintained social order. They shaped the moral landscape just as much as the church shaped the spiritual one. For the medieval citizen, the law wasn't an abstract concept found in books. It was a tangible, visible, and often terrifying presence woven into the very fabric of their daily lives. It was the shadow that followed them through the sunlit streets, a constant reminder of the price of stepping out of line. This journey into the grimmer side of medieval urban life shows a society grappling with how to maintain order in a chaotic world. It's a stark contrast to our modern systems, but it reveals a fundamental truth. Every city, in every era, must define and enforce its own brand of justice. We've walked the bustling streets, explored the markets, and peeked into the halls of power. But a city is more than just stone and commerce. It's a place for people, for growth, and for care. Now, we're diving into two pillars of medieval urban life that nurtured both the mind and the body: education and hospitals. Forget the stereotype of the Dark Ages for a moment. While much of Europe was rural, the growing cities were becoming vibrant hubs of learning. It all started in the quiet, hallowed halls of monastic and cathedral schools. Picture this: sunlight filtering through a high-arched window, the air thick with the scent of old parchment and ink. A monk, his voice a steady drone, recites Latin grammar to a group of young boys, the future clergy and administrators of the realm. In these scriptoriums, another kind of magic was happening. Here, patient hands worked tirelessly, copying ancient texts from Greece and Rome, as well as new theological and philosophical works. Each stroke of the quill was a deliberate act of preservation, a bridge connecting the classical past to the medieval present. These weren't just dusty old books. They were the very foundation of Western thought, and the cities were their guardians. Without these dedicated scribes, countless treasures of human knowledge would have been lost to time. It was a slow, painstaking process, but it kept the flame of learning alive. But something new was stirring in the urban air. As cities grew wealthier and more complex, the demand for educated individuals, lawyers, doctors, theologians, and clerks skyrocketed. The old cathedral schools, while vital, couldn't keep up. This growing thirst for knowledge led to one of the most brilliant innovations of the Middle Ages: the university. Imagine arriving in a city like Bologna, Italy, in the 12th century. The streets are a chaotic, multilingual Babel. You're not here for trade or a pilgrimage. You're a student, drawn by the reputation of its great legal scholars. Or perhaps you've made the long journey to Paris, the undisputed center of theology, to study at the Sorbonne under masters of philosophy. These weren't universities in the sense of a grand campus with ivy-covered walls. Not yet. The word university, or universitas in Latin, originally meant a corporation or guild, and that's exactly what the first universities were: guilds of students or masters. In Bologna, the students held the power. They organized themselves into a guild to protect their interests, hiring professors and setting the curriculum and fees. If they felt a professor wasn't up to snuff, they could fine him or even fire him. In Paris, it was the other way around. The masters or teachers formed a guild to control the standards of teaching and the awarding of degrees, protecting their own professional status. Regardless of who was in charge, the core experience was the lecture. Students would pack into rented rooms, sitting on straw-strewn floors, furiously scribbling notes on wax tablets as a master read from a rare, expensive textbook and offered his commentary. There were no printing presses, so books were precious commodities, often chained to desks in libraries. Learning was an auditory experience, a dialogue between the master and his students. Debates, or disputations, were the intellectual equivalent of a jousting tournament. A master would propose a question, and students and other masters would argue for and against it, using logic, rhetoric, and citations from authoritative texts. These were intense, passionate affairs that sharpened the mind and advanced scholarly inquiry. It was through this rigorous system of lecture and disputation that thinkers like Thomas Aquinas reconciled Christian theology with Aristotelian philosophy, shaping intellectual life for centuries to come. These urban universities were magnets, pulling in the brightest minds from across Europe, creating a truly international community of scholars that transcended borders. But what about when the body failed? What happened when you got sick or injured in a medieval city? Life was fragile, and health was precarious. This is where another crucial urban institution comes in, the hospital. Now, when we hear hospital, we think of sterile operating rooms and advanced medical technology. We need to adjust that image for the Middle Ages. The medieval hospital, or hospice, was a more holistic institution, often rooted in religious charity. The word itself shares a root with hospitality. These places were founded on the Christian principle of caring for those in need. Many hospitals were run by religious orders, like the Knights Hospitaller or dedicated orders of monks and nuns. They opened their doors not just to the sick, but also to the poor, the elderly, orphans, and pilgrims on a long journey. Their primary function was not necessarily to cure, but to care, to provide a clean bed, warm food, and spiritual comfort in a world that could be incredibly harsh. Step inside a typical medieval hospital. You might see a long ward lined with simple beds. Nuns move quietly between them, changing dressings, offering a soothing broth, or praying with a patient. The air might be scented with herbs from the hospital's own garden, used to make poultices and remedies. While their understanding of disease was limited based mostly on the ancient Greek theory of the four humors, they understood the importance of rest, nutrition, and hygiene. In fact, many hospital rules mandated clean linens and regular bathing, practices that were often more advanced than what you'd find in the average private home. These institutions were woven into the very fabric of the city. Wealthy merchants and nobles would often fund hospitals in their wills, believing it was a pious act that would help ensure their salvation. They became important civic landmarks, a visible testament to the community's commitment to caring for its most vulnerable members. While the medicine they practiced was rudimentary by our standards, the act of providing dedicated care was a profound social development. It was an acknowledgement that everyone, regardless of their station, deserved comfort in their time of suffering. So, as we leave the halls of the university and the wards of the hospital, we see a more complete picture of the medieval city. It was a place that nurtured not just economic ambition, but also intellectual curiosity and human compassion. The university fed the mind, pushing the boundaries of knowledge and training the leaders of tomorrow. The hospital cared for the body and soul, offering a safety net in a dangerous world. Together, these institutions reveal the heart of the urban community. They show us a society that valued learning and looked after its own, creating a more complex, resilient, and humane environment. They were truly centers of care for both body and mind. Let's dive into the most obvious clues first, the street names. When you see a Tanner Street, or a Rue des Tanneurs in France, or a Via dei Conciatori in Italy, you're literally walking through a ghost of an industry. Imagine the smell of curing leather, the sounds of craftsmen hammering and stretching hides. These weren't just random names. They were medieval GPS. They told you exactly where to go for a specific trade. These names were born out of a system of organization that was crucial for the medieval city to function. The craft guilds were the powerhouses of the local economy. The leather workers, the bakers, the blacksmiths, the weavers, they all tended to cluster together. Why? It was practical. They could share resources, control the quality of their goods, and create a specialized marketplace. A baker's lane, or a Bäckerstrasse in Germany, wasn't just a street. It was a destination. You'd be hit by the warm, inviting smell of fresh bread from a dozen different ovens. This was the city's living, breathing yellow pages, carved into the very layout of the streets. And it wasn't just about trades. Street names could tell you about the people who lived there, or the geography of the land before the city swallowed it. A Lombard street, found in many European cities, points to the districts where Italian bankers and merchants, often from the Lombardy region, set up shop. A mill lane probably led to the town's watermill or windmill, a vital source of power. A vein street might be a memory of the vineyards that once grew on a sunny slope before houses were built. Each name is a tiny fossilized story of commerce, migration, or the natural landscape. Now, let's lift our eyes from the street signs and look at the larger structures. Those ancient city gates and stone archways, you see? They're not just picturesque photo opportunities. They were the city's front doors and its security system. Take a look at a name like Newgate in London. The name itself tells you it replaced an older gate. These structures defined the city's perimeter. Passing through one meant you were leaving the relative safety and jurisdiction of the city and entering the wilder, less regulated countryside. They were checkpoints for collecting taxes on goods, for controlling who came in and out, and for shutting the city down at night against potential threats. The very existence of a gate tells you, here lay the edge of our world. And what about those solitary stone towers that still punctuate the skyline in cities like Bologna or San Gimignano in Italy? They look like medieval skyscrapers, and in a way, they were. These were watchtowers, but also status symbols. Powerful families built them to show off their wealth and influence, and to keep an eye on their rivals. They were private fortresses within the city walls, a clear sign of the power struggles and social hierarchies that defined medieval urban life. Their height and location weren't random. They were strategic, offering a vantage point over key streets, markets, and the homes of competing families. Walking beneath them, you can almost feel the tension, the ambition, and the constant jostling for power. But the clues aren't always so grand. Sometimes the whispers of history are much more subtle. Look down at your feet. Have you ever noticed a sudden change in the cobblestones? A shift from smooth, rounded river stones to rougher, squarer granite blocks? This isn't just shoddy repair work. It could be a ghost boundary. You might be crossing from the area of an old Roman settlement into the newer medieval expansion. Or perhaps you've just walked across the line of a long-vanished city wall with the paving material changed. The original wall is gone, but its footprint remains, etched into the ground like a faint scar. Similarly, a strange curve in an otherwise straight road might be a sign that the street was built to go around a long-forgotten monastery, a sacred well, or a massive ancient tree that the builders didn't dare cut down. These subtle shifts in the urban grid are like geological layers, telling a story of what was there before. The city didn't just appear. It grew, it adapted, it wrapped itself around older obstacles and features. The planners and builders of the past made decisions based on the landscape, on existing structures, and on social needs. And we can still read those decisions today in the curves and patterns of the streets. Think about the marketplaces. A wide-open square might seem ordinary now, but its shape and size are often a direct legacy of its function as a medieval market. A haymarket or a corn market needed a large open space for wagons to unload and for livestock to be sold. The streets leading into these squares are often wider than the surrounding alleyways, designed to funnel in the crowds and the commerce. The very dimensions of the space are a testament to its historical importance as the city's economic heart. When you stand in one of these squares, close your eyes for a moment. You can almost hear the cacophony of vendors shouting, animals bleating, and citizens haggling over prices. The space itself holds the memory of that energy. So the next time you're exploring a city, whether it's a famous ancient capital or your own hometown, I want you to become a historical detective. Look for the clues. Read the street names. Notice the old archways and the strange curves in the road. Pay attention to the texture of the pavement beneath your feet. These aren't just quaint, old-fashioned details. They are tangible connections to the past. They are the whispers of history, allowing you to walk through layers of time and connect with the lives, the struggles, and the ambitions of the people who built these cities stone by stone. You are walking through a living museum. Imagine you're wandering through the narrow, winding alleys of Siena, Italy. As you navigate the maze-like streets, you're not just getting lost in a beautiful city. You're tracing the same paths that merchants, pilgrims, and artisans walked 1,000 years ago. These streets weren't designed for cars. They were built for people, for horse-drawn carts, for the hustle and bustle of a community living and working closely together. The layout itself tells a story of a city that grew organically, expanding street by street, house by house, responding to the natural landscape and the needs of its inhabitants. This isn't unique to Siena. Think of a classic German Altstadt or Old Town. Many are built in concentric rings, like the ripples in a pond. The innermost ring often traces the line of the original medieval wall, with streets radiating outwards like spokes on a wheel. As the city grew, new walls were built, and new rings of streets formed. When you walk from the center of a city like Nuremberg or Rothenburg ob der Tauber, you are literally walking through centuries of urban expansion. Each ring is a chapter in the city's history, frozen in stone and cobblestone. But medieval planners weren't always so spontaneous. In contrast to these organic cities, we have the French Bastides. These were new towns, often founded in the 13th and 14th centuries for strategic or economic reasons. Here you'll find a completely different logic at play, the grid plan. Towns like Montpellier in southwestern France were laid out with an almost modern precision, featuring straight streets intersecting at right angles, all organized around a central market square. This wasn't accidental. It was a deliberate, top-down approach to city planning designed for efficiency, defense, and commerce. The central square was the heart of the community, the site of the market, the church, and civic life. The grid made it easy to divide land, organize defenses, and control traffic, even the horse and cart traffic of the day. So, we have these two main types, the organic, winding city, and the planned, gridded town. And what's truly astonishing is how these ancient layouts continue to function today. The very things that make these places challenging for cars, the narrow lanes, the tight corners, the pedestrian-only zones, are precisely what make them so charming and vibrant. They force us to slow down, to walk, to interact with our surroundings on a human scale. The medieval footprint has created natural public spaces that encourage community, commerce, and connection. The central market square of a Bastide is still where you'll find cafes, shops, and weekly markets. The winding alleys of an Italian hill town are lined with artisan workshops and family-run trattorias. This medieval framework isn't just a quaint backdrop for tourism. It actively shapes the modern identity of these cities. The street plan influences property lines, dictates where new buildings can go, and determines how people move from one place to another. In a way, it's a form of urban DNA, passed down through generations. When a city decides to pedestrianize its historic core, it's not a radical new idea. It's a return to the original purpose of those streets. They are reclaiming the human-centric design that was there all along. The endurance of these plans is a testament to their effectiveness. They were built for people, not machines. And as our modern cities grapple with issues of traffic, pollution, and social isolation, we're starting to realize the wisdom embedded in these medieval designs. The focus on walkability, mixed-use spaces where people live and work, and a strong community center are all ideas that contemporary urban planners are now championing. It turns out the past has a lot to teach us about building a better future. Think about the feeling of discovery when you turn a corner in one of these cities and stumble upon a hidden courtyard or a stunning view. That sense of surprise and delight is a direct result of the medieval layout. It's an experience that a predictable, car-oriented suburb can rarely offer. The medieval city is a landscape meant to be explored on foot, to be experienced slowly and intimately. Its design encourages us to be present, to look up at the architecture, to listen to the sounds of the city, and to feel a part of something much older and larger than ourselves. So the next time you find yourself in a historic European city, take a moment to look at the streets themselves. Notice how they curve, how they intersect, how they open into a square or narrow into a tiny passage. You're not just on a street. You're reading a living map, a story of how a community grew, how it defended itself, how it traded, and how it lived. This medieval footprint is not a relic. It is a foundational structure, a living, breathing part of the urban fabric that continues to influence daily life, fostering a sense of place and identity that has lasted for a millennium. It's the ultimate proof that good design that prioritizes people and community, can truly stand the test of time. Let's start with a little thought experiment. Imagine a formidable stone fortress, built centuries ago to defend a city. Its thick walls have seen battles, sieges, and the march of kings. What do you do with a building like that today? Tear it down to build a parking lot? Let it crumble into a pile of forgotten stones? Or do you do something brilliant? This is where the magic of adaptive reuse comes in. It's the process of taking an old structure, respecting its history and architectural soul, and giving it a brand new purpose. It's not just a renovation, it's a reincarnation. And medieval buildings are prime candidates for this incredible transformation. Why? Because they were built to last. We're talking about solid stone, massive timber beams, and craftsmanship that has literally stood the test of time. Think about a medieval guildhall. These were the bustling centers of commerce and craft, where merchants and artisans gathered, made deals, and shaped the economy of their city. The grand hall, with its high, vaulted ceilings and large windows, was designed to impress and to accommodate large groups of people. Fast forward to today. What else needs a large, impressive space for gatherings? A restaurant. All over Europe, you can find former guild halls transformed into stunning dining establishments. You can sip a coffee under the same Timberberg roof where cloth merchants once haggled over prices. The history isn't erased. It becomes the ambience. The echoes of the past add flavor to the present. Let's take another example. Monasteries. These were sprawling complexes, often built in serene, secluded locations. They included cloisters for quiet contemplation, scriptoriums for copying manuscripts, and dormitories for the monks. What kind of modern institution values quiet contemplation and spaces for learning? A university. Many of the world's oldest and most prestigious universities, like Oxford and Cambridge, have roots in monastic traditions and have seamlessly integrated medieval monastic buildings into their campuses. Students now walk through ancient cloisters on their way to class, their footsteps mingling with the ghostly tread of monks from a bygone era. The old scriptorium might now be a library, the refectory a student dining hall. The original purpose, a center for knowledge and reflection, is preserved just in a new, secular context. This process isn't just about finding a convenient new use for an old space. It requires incredible architectural ingenuity. You can't just move some furniture in and call it a day. Engineers and architects have to solve complex puzzles. How do you install modern plumbing and electricity without damaging 800-year-old stonework? How do you meet today as safety and accessibility standards in a building designed long before such things were even conceived? The solutions are often as creative as the original designs. Modern glass structures might be inserted within ancient stone walls, creating a stunning contrast between old and new. Hidden conduits can be run through existing cavities in the walls to hide wiring. Mezzanine floors can be added to cavernous halls to create more usable space without altering the original ceiling. Each project is a delicate dance between preservation and innovation, a conversation between architects of the past and the present. One of the most common examples you might see is the transformation of old city gates and towers. These were once critical defensive structures, the first line of defense against invaders. Today, their strategic importance is gone, but their symbolic value is immense. They are landmarks, icons of a city's identity. So, what do they become? Museums are a perfect fit. A small gatehouse can be transformed into a charming local history museum, telling the story of the very walls it inhabits. The climb up a narrow spiral staircase in a watchtower can lead you not to a lookout post for archers, but to a viewing platform offering a panoramic vista of the modern city. The building's original function of providing a view is retained, but its purpose shifts from defense to tourism and education. So why is this so important? Why go to all this trouble and expense when you could just build something new? Because adaptive reuse does something remarkable. It weaves history directly into the fabric of contemporary life. These buildings aren't just static monuments behind a velvet rope gathering dust. They are active, functional, and economically viable parts of the city. A restaurant in a guild hall employs people and pays taxes. A university in a monastery educates the next generation of leaders. A museum in a city gate attracts tourists and enriches the cultural landscape. This approach prevents our cities from becoming historically sterile. It ensures that the physical remnants of the past don't just survive, but thrive. When you walk through a city and see these transformed structures, you're experiencing a living timeline. The medieval street plan might still dictate the flow of traffic, and the old market square might still be a place where people gather, just now for a farmer's market or a concert instead of a medieval fair. The adaptive spirit of medieval planning continues to this day. It shows us that good design is timeless. A well-built structure, a logically planned space, can serve humanity for centuries, adapting to our changing needs. It's a powerful lesson in sustainability. In an age where we're often too quick to tear down and replace, these ancient buildings remind us of the value of longevity, of building things with care, and of finding new life in the old. The next time you're traveling, or even just exploring your own city, keep an eye out for these historical chameleons. Look for the modern shop sign on a Gothic archway, or the cafe tables set up in a centuries-old courtyard. You might be surprised at how much of the medieval world is still with us, not as a ruin, but as a vibrant and essential part of our 21st century lives. They are a testament to the idea that the past is not something to be locked away, but something to be lived in. How do we preserve these precious snapshots of the past while welcoming the world to see them? Let's get into it. These time capsule cities, with their winding cobblestone streets and ancient stone walls, aren't just old towns. They are invaluable heritage sites, recognized globally for their unique character and historical significance. Think of places like Carcassonne in France or San Gimignano in Italy. They are, in essence, living museums, and this makes them magnets for tourists from every corner of the globe. But this popularity brings a huge question. How do you manage the flood of visitors without loving these places to death? It's a delicate balancing act. On one hand, tourism is a massive economic boom. It creates jobs, from tour guides and historians to shopkeepers and restaurateurs. The revenue generated can be funneled directly back into the preservation efforts that are so desperately needed. Without tourists, many of these cities simply wouldn't have the funds to maintain their historic buildings. On the other hand, the sheer volume of people can cause significant wear and tear. Imagine thousands of footsteps every single day on stone staircases that are centuries old, or the constant flash of cameras affecting ancient frescoes. There's also the risk of what some call Disneyfication, where the authentic, lived-in character of a city is replaced by a polished, commercialized version of itself, full of souvenir shops and tourist traps. The soul of the city can get lost in the shuffle. This is where the incredible work of preservationists, historians, and city planners comes in. Their job is a constant, meticulous effort. Picture this: a team of experts carefully restoring a crumbling medieval facade, not just slapping on some new plaster, but using period-appropriate materials and techniques to ensure authenticity. They study old documents and paintings to make sure every detail is just right. It's a painstaking process that can take years for a single building. And what about what lies beneath the surface? Often, when utility lines need to be updated or a foundation needs to be repaired, it triggers a full-blown archaeological dig. These excavations are like peeling back the layers of time. Archaeologists might uncover the foundations of a Roman villa that existed before the medieval city, or find everyday objects like pottery, tools, and coins that tell us intimate stories about the people who lived here 1,000 years ago. Each discovery adds another rich layer to our understanding of the city's evolution. So, how do cities strike the right balance? Many have implemented clever strategies. Some limit the number of visitors allowed into specific areas each day. Others create pedestrian-only zones to reduce pollution and congestion within the historic centers. There's also a growing movement towards promoting slow tourism, encouraging visitors to stay longer, engage with the local culture on a deeper level, and venture beyond the main tourist hotspots. This helps to distribute the economic benefits more evenly and reduces the pressure on the most famous sites. It's also about education. When tourists understand the fragility and importance of what they're seeing, they're more likely to be respectful. Museums, interpretive centers, and knowledgeable guides play a crucial role in telling the story of the city, not just as a collection of old buildings, but as a living, breathing community with a continuous history. They help us see beyond the postcard view and appreciate the immense effort that goes into keeping that view alive. Ultimately, the goal is to ensure that these cities remain authentic. They are not just historical theme parks, they are homes. People live, work, and raise families within these ancient walls. The challenge is to integrate modern life with its needs for plumbing, internet, and electricity into a medieval framework without destroying its character. It means finding creative solutions, like hiding modern infrastructure or adapting old buildings for new uses, such as turning a former monastery into a university or a warehouse into an art gallery. These irreplaceable urban treasures are our connection to the past. They teach us about who we were and offer clues about who we can be. The work of preserving them is a promise we make to future generations, a promise that they, too, will be able to walk these same streets and feel the profound weight and wonder of history. It's a massive responsibility, but one that is essential for safeguarding our shared human heritage. In this final chapter, we're bringing it all home. We're going to explore how the lessons from the past, forged out of necessity 1,000 years ago, might just be the most forward-thinking ideas for our future. Let's start with the most obvious feature of a medieval town, its size. Everything was compact. Why? Because most people walked everywhere. This wasn't a lifestyle choice. It was a reality. Your feet were your primary mode of transport. This simple fact had a profound impact on city design. It created what we now call walkability. Think about it. In a medieval city, your home, your workplace, the market, the church, the local tavern, everything you needed for daily life was likely within a 15-minute walk. This created a vibrant, bustling street life. It wasn't just about getting from point A to point B. The journey itself was part of the community experience. You'd run into neighbors, catch up on gossip, see artisans at work in their open-fronted shops. The streets were the living arteries of the city. Now, contrast that with many of our modern cities, designed around the car. We drive from our suburban homes to a disconnected office park, then to a giant supermarket, all separated by miles of asphalt. We've engineered physical activity and spontaneous social interaction right out of our daily lives. The medieval model reminds us that a city built for people, not just for vehicles, is inherently more active, more social, and more connected. The modern push for 15-minute cities isn't a radical new idea. It's a return to a principle that was perfected centuries ago. Another key lesson is the concept of mixed-use neighborhoods. In the Middle Ages, there was no strict zoning like we have today. A shoemaker didn't just work in his shop. He and his family lived above it. The wealthy merchant's grand house might be right next to a humble baker's cottage. Different social classes and functions were woven together into the same urban fabric. This created a dynamic 24/7 environment. Neighborhoods didn't empty out after 5 p.m. like a modern business district. They were always alive, which also made them safer. More eyes on the street, as the famous urbanist Jane Jacobs would later call it, meant a natural form of community surveillance. This organic mix is something modern planners are desperately trying to recreate. We're trying to reintroduce residential units into commercial areas and build developments where people can live, work, and play without ever needing to start their car. The medieval city shows us that this blend isn't just efficient. It creates a richer, more resilient social ecosystem. Let's talk about community centers. Every medieval town had a heart, a central point where public life converged. This was usually the market square. This wasn't just a place to buy and sell goods. It was the city's outdoor living room. It's where public announcements were made, festivals were celebrated, justice was dispensed, and people from all walks of life gathered. The cathedral, or main church, often anchored this space, providing a spiritual and civic focal point. These central squares gave the city a clear identity and a sense of shared purpose. They were the physical manifestation of the community. In our sprawling modern cities, where is our central square? A shopping mall? A highway interchange? We've lost these vital centers of gravity that pull a community together. By studying the design and function of medieval market squares, we can learn how to create public spaces that truly serve as the heart of a neighborhood, fostering a sense of belonging and civic pride that is so often missing today. Now for a crucial topic, sustainability. This is where the medieval model really shines, not by choice, but by necessity. Medieval builders were masters of localism. They didn't have global supply chains. They built with what was available right there. Timber from the nearby forest, stone from the local quarry, clay for bricks from the riverbed. This created cities with a distinct local character. You can tell if you're in Tuscany or Bavaria just by the color of the roof tiles and the texture of the walls. This deep connection to local resources is a profound lesson in sustainability. It minimized transportation, supported local economies, and ensured that buildings were naturally suited to their climate. This wasn't about being green. It was about being smart and practical. Today, as we grapple with the environmental cost of shipping materials across the globe, the medieval principle of build with what you've got feels more relevant than ever. It's a blueprint for a more resilient and less resource-intensive approach to construction. Furthermore, medieval cities were inherently designed to conserve. The dense, compact layout with shared walls helped to retain heat in the winter and stay cool in the summer. Narrow streets provided shade from the sun. Nothing was wasted. Old Roman structures were repurposed, and buildings were constantly adapted and reused over centuries. This was the ultimate form of recycling. It has a mindset of stewardship and resourcefulness that stands in stark contrast to our modern tear-down and rebuild culture. The most sustainable building is the one that's already standing, and medieval cities are a testament to that truth, having adapted and survived for 1,000 years. So, when we look at these time capsule cities, places like Siena, Bruges, or Carcassonne, we shouldn't see them as just picturesque tourist traps. We should see them as working prototypes, as laboratories of urban living that have stood the test of time. They teach us that a livable city is a walkable city. A vibrant city is a mixed-use city. A strong community needs a central heart. And a truly sustainable city is one that is built in harmony with its local environment. The challenges we face today, climate change, social isolation, resource depletion, are immense. The solutions won't be simple. But as we search for new ways to design our urban future, it's worth remembering that sometimes the most forward-thinking ideas are the ones that have been with us all along, just waiting to be rediscovered. The lessons from our medieval predecessors aren't about going backward. They are about finding a more human-centered, resilient, and enduring path forward. They remind us that good design is timeless. And so, our incredible journey through the time capsule cities of the medieval world draws to a close. For the past several weeks, we've walked the ancient cobblestones together, tracing the outlines of a world both distant and surprisingly familiar. We've stood in the shadows of mighty city walls, those stone guardians that promised security in an uncertain age. We felt the vibrant pulse of medieval life in bustling market squares, the true hearts of these cities, where goods, gossip, and destinies were exchanged daily. We gazed up in awe at the soaring spires of cathedrals, architectural marvels that weren't just places of worship, but physical manifestations of a community's faith, ambition, and collective identity. From the tightly packed, organic alleyways of Siena, which seemed to follow the natural contours of the hills, to the more structured, planned expansions of towns like Montpellier in France, we've uncovered a remarkable story of adaptation and foresight. These cities weren't accidents of history. They were masterpieces of medieval urban planning, each lay out a unique solution to the challenges of its time and place. They were designed for people, for defense, for commerce, and for community. Every narrow lane that provided shade in the summer, every public square that fostered social cohesion, every defensive bend in a street, it all served a purpose. These weren't just collections of buildings. They were intricate, living organisms designed to thrive. As we conclude this series, I hope what stays with you is a profound appreciation for this enduring legacy. When you look at a city like Carcassonne in France, with its double-layered walls and fairy-tale towers, you're not just seeing a fortress. You're seeing a masterclass in strategic defense, a physical representation of power and protection that influenced military architecture for centuries. When we explored the canals of Bruges, we didn't just see picturesque waterways. We saw the lifeblood of a commercial superpower, an ingenious network that turned a landlocked city into one of Northern Europe's most important trading hubs. These cities are living, breathing textbooks. The genius of medieval planners lay in their ability to think in multiple dimensions. They balanced the sacred with the secular, the private dwelling with the public space, and the immediate need for security with the long-term potential for growth. They understood the importance of a central focal point, whether it was a cathedral, a town hall, or a marketplace, to give the city its identity and its citizens a sense of shared purpose. Think of the Piazza del Campo in Siena, that magnificent shell-shaped square. It wasn't just built to be beautiful. It was designed to be the civic and social center of the city, a place where the entire community could gather, govern, and celebrate. It is a testament to the idea that a city's heart is found in its public spaces. But perhaps the most powerful lesson these cities teach us is about resilience. They have survived wars, plagues, fires, and the relentless march of time. They've adapted, evolved, and absorbed centuries of change, yet their fundamental character remains. The original street plan of a city like York in England, first laid down by the Romans and then adapted by the Vikings and Normans, is still largely visible today. You can literally walk through layers of history. This continuity is magical. It offers us a tangible connection to the past, a thread that links our world to theirs. These aren't dusty relics behind museum glass. They are vibrant urban centers where people still live, work, and dream, their daily lives unfolding against a backdrop of centuries. The winding lanes, the grand squares, the towering spires, they continue to enchant and inspire us. They draw millions of visitors each year, not just because they are beautiful, but because they feel authentic. They feel human-scaled. In an age of sprawling megacities and uniform glass and steel skylines, these medieval time capsules offer a compelling alternative. They remind us of the value of walkability, of mixed-use neighborhoods where homes and shops coexist, and of the simple beauty of a well-placed public bench or fountain. They whisper that a city should be more than just efficient. It should also be soulful. This journey has been a powerful reminder that history is not just a collection of stories in a book. It's the very ground we walk upon. It's etched into the stones of the cathedral, embedded in the layout of the streets, and alive in the enduring spirit of community. The past isn't truly past. It continually shapes our present and informs our future. These medieval cities are not frozen in amber. They are dynamic, living lessons in stone and mortar. And this is where the past meets the present in a truly meaningful way. As our own cities face unprecedented challenges, climate change, overpopulation, social isolation, we find ourselves looking for sustainable, human-centric solutions. The wisdom embedded in these ancient designs has never been more relevant. The medieval city, with its compact form, its reliance on pedestrian movement, and its strong sense of community, offers us a blueprint, not to copy, but to learn from. Can we create modern neighborhoods with the same sense of place and belonging? Can we design public squares that encourage genuine human interaction, not just hurried passage? Can we build with the same sense of permanence, creating a legacy for future generations? These are the questions that these time capsule cities compel us to ask. They challenge us to think not just about what is technologically possible, but about what makes a city a truly great place to live. They urge us to be as bold, as ingenious, and as community-minded as those medieval masons, merchants, and master planners were all those centuries ago. They are a call to action, reminding us that the choices we make in urban planning today will define the lives of generations to come, just as their choices have defined ours. And with that, our exploration comes to an end. It has been an absolute privilege to share this journey with you, to peel back the layers of time and uncover the secrets of these magnificent places. Thank you so much for joining me, for your comments, your insights, and your shared passion for the past. If you've been captivated by the enduring magic of medieval urbanism, please consider giving this video and the series a like. It truly helps more people discover this content. Share it with a friend, a fellow history buff, or anyone who dreams of walking through history. And of course, if you haven't already, please subscribe to the channel and hit that notification bell so you don't miss our next deep dive into the fascinating stories that built our world. Thank you for watching.